Welcome, Michael, to the podcast, or back to the podcast, I should say.
I'm super excited. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Yeah, we were talking before I hit the record button that we had you here in episode 42, and now we are at 198. It's kind of crazy. So, like you did the first time we had you on, you've come up with a book that I didn't even know I needed to read when I first got to read it. So you've got this YA book called Absolute Heart, and it's the first book in the Infernal Instruments of the Dragon series. Tell everybody what this is about, both the book and kind of the series behind it.
Well, yeah, the Absolute Heart is, above all else, it's a steampunk book. It's an adventure set in a world where clockwork-powered England in 1880s Victorian-era England is at war, and sort of Cold War when we first pick up the series, against the magically powered Ireland, who's been kind of besieged by the Brotherhood of the Mage. It's a warlock group that has sort of made the Queen subservient to them in ways, and you'll have to find out when you read it. And it's really the story about two boys, Gavin, the High Councilman's son from England, and his friends, and following him when he has these terrible secrets. He thinks they're terrible, and when they're found out, he could be executed for them, for at least one of them. So he does what all teenagers do when they have something awful happen and they think they're going to get in trouble. He runs away, and his best friend Landa, who's an artificer, which is a mechanic, a computer engineer, and she's a powerful female character that I'm really proud of. And she has his back and challenges him and calls him foolish when he's foolish. And she goes with him. And some other people who have their own agendas go with as well on this quest. And then the other side, the Brotherhood sends Orion of Oberon, who is a young warlock of immense power, because he's the nephew of the ailing Irish queen. They send him off to get the most powerful weapon in the world, the Dragon Stones. And there's a lot of mystery and history about the Dragon Stones and what they are and what they can actually do. But they want them to end this war in their favor. So, of course, they have a meet cute, or at least I hope people think it's a meet cute.
It's a meet cute. It's totally meet cute.
They do. And they have to decide, like, are they going to get together? Are they, will they, won't they? Of course, there's the will they, won't they thing. And that works in pretty much everything. I'm really excited about it. I'm excited about this steampunk adventure, and it sets off and it's set to be a trilogy. So I'm really excited about that, and hopeful people will like it. And the inclusion of fairies and the air steamships and all the wonder that is steampunk.
And steampunk is so not really anything I read. I dabble in it periodically, but something about Gavin and Orion and the badass friend you gave Gavin. Full disclosure to the listeners. Like, I read a very early draft of this when you had a lot going on in book one, and you've pared it back now into a more condensed story. But how did all this coalesce and come together, and what was the inspiration like?
Yeah, well, and really you should pat yourself on the back, because your viewers should know that you read an early arc and gave me notes and edited and really kind of dissected it for me. Like it was, wherever it was messy, you, like a good editor, said that's messy. So it's hopefully a lot better now. But the research is the research starts with reading steampunk books and reading lots of YA, which is, of course, a terrible addiction of mine. In reading all of that steampunk and, finding those characters that you like and you want to write about, maybe because I use Scrivener, have the photo option to put your vision, the characters, the places, the ships. You put photos in there, and I work with a split screen, so I can always reference that. So I never really lose track of it. But it was great looking into all that steampunk stuff, and going into like Cassandra Clare's Clockwork Angel series, or Scott Westerfeld's Leviathan series, and if I can get even a little bit of that spirit, I'll be really happy. But it starts with loving steampunk. You really write what you know and write what you love. And I've never been an airship captain, but I love reading about them, and I love that whole idea. And thinking about like Leviathan, that series has a powerful gender bending quality to it, with the girl, because she has to dresses like a boy and acts like a boy in order to have a career. And I love that, and I hope I engendered Lando with that a little bit as well.
What went into creating your world of magic in Ireland and steam power and clockworks in England? Because there's so much that you could pull from to create the steampunk universe. What was your decision to like make these things your universe?
Steampunk, one of the amazing things about it is, an amazing thing about world building as well, is you can go with historical fiction, like my first book, and it's wonderfully creative, but you're also stuck with, you can't lie. It's historical fiction. You can make up characters and you can make up some things, but really, if you get too far away from reality, people stop believing in what you're writing about with historical fiction. At least I think so. So I stuck with the Roaring Twenties pretty well, and that kind of thing. Steampunk is like that a little bit too, where you're in the 1880s Victorian era, but then you have these advances in this you can get creative and wild and all of that. So a lot of that came from traveling for me too. Like I've traveled to Ireland and I kissed the Blarney Stone, which of course means I'm full of BS, I guess, is the gift of gab, And then I went to England, and I went to Stonehenge, and I played around amongst all of the henges there, because that's where they keep them, and had a lot of fun. And the idea of the magic stones and powerful and Ireland magic and castles, and then of course the troubles with the war between Northern Ireland and England, and I just rolled that back 40 years or so, and brought all that magic and the stones and the power. I brought all that together, and that's really where the idea came from. I also wrote a comic book like 20 years ago that had a lot of the fantasy stuff in it, and it never got published, but I tweaked it and changed it throughout the years. So you can almost say that this part of this book, the backstory, the fantasy magic side, is about 20 years in the making, which I guess makes this a labor of love.
That's very cool that it goes back quite that far.
Yeah. Which makes me feel old saying it out loud.
You could have had the idea when you were 5 or 6, and
Right.
What do we have to look forward to as the trilogy progresses, without obviously spoiling anything necessarily, but what could you kind of hint at us about the story arc?
Well, so, I'm a big fan of sci-fi, and, steampunk is really an offshoot of sci-fi in a way, or vice versa, I guess, but, or not vice versa, but, but Star Wars, originally was Star Wars. And then they added A New Hope to the title when they were like, well, Darth Vader's still out there. They gave Luke and Han some medals. And by the way, droids' rights, we're the medals for the droids, right? But so, then you got Darth Vader out there. So I love that idea of there's always more. If you look for it, if you see the little bits, like there's actually Darth Vader and an Emperor. We're still at war, guys. So come back for Empire. And guess what? It's going to get darker and worse. And that's really kind of what's happening here, is that the book sort of gives you an ending, but and I think so does every book. Hopefully will give an ending, but it has an ending, but it really isn't. If you're reading it, there's a lot more that's about to come down, and we might lose some people along the way, and maybe find some new people that you love, and who's together may not always be together.
So with everything between the magic and the clockworks and the steam and everything, your book Bible for this must be huge.
Well, yeah, I think Scrivener has you just keep scrolling with all the characters and the development and the research. And, I used, there's a great British author named Ellen Gregory who did some high seas adventure, and she read an early edit too and gave me some Briticisms, which I kept calling Britishisms, and gave me some pointers in that. And we were joking about that too, that I have just 100 pages on the parts of a ship, sailing ships, hundreds of pages, and you could just bore people to death writing about that. And so it's like, give that little bit to make it believable and make it fantastic or whatever, and then let it go. And then I just use that incredible knowledge about midships and jibs and at parties, and I can I can talk about all that stuff at a party now, but you don't put too much of it in your world building. But it is fun. I do have lots of stuff. Like when I'm writing, there's fairies in the book, in the land of fairy, and I did so much research about Oberon, the king of the fairies, and all that history. And then my amazing editor, Dawn Johnson at Dreamspinner and Harmony Inc.
Hey, Dawn.
Yay!
My editor too. She's awesome.
They're really, the whole team has been amazing, and each person has challenged me, which is really part of the deal. You have to kill your darlings, right? You have to allow some of your characters to change with some of the professional feedback. And so anyway, I was able to use that research and pull it in, and I still miss stuff. And some of those editors were like, hey, the name of that person, shouldn't it be this for this reason historically? I'm like, yep. I don't know what I was thinking, and so it's really, it takes a village,
What do you hope people get out of this book?
What I'm hoping to get out of it is enough people interested to get a whole trilogy out of it, and to get an audiobook. I really want to hear this story come alive, this swashbuckling adventure come alive. I hope people get entertainment out of it. I hope they feel empowered and maybe challenged on their beliefs a little bit, which is, whatever lofty goal, and it sounds like hubris to say it, but I hope people read it and see the LGBTQ plus world is just like everything else. It's steeped in mystery and history and great characters with amazing depth, capable of heroic acts and terrible evils and everything in between. Some people will write a character and be afraid to make the gay character or the trans character do something horrible. Like that's wrong. They have to do everything that everyone else does in order to make it real. And so I'm hoping people will forgive if I do something horrible to a character, or make them do something, terribly wicked, mustache twirling. But, and not, of course, hate the straight characters that do bad things as well.
Right. Now, you kept a lot of this book in your family in some ways too, because your husband, Jason Buren, did the cover and interior art, and the cover is gorgeous, as is some of that interior stuff.
I think you're going to hold that up there, right?
Oh, there you go.
I just love, thank you. I love the art. Yeah.
How did he come to get involved in it, and what was it like collaborating with him on those elements?
Well, so Jason's an amazing artist and graphic designer and everything. And after we worked on the first one together, and we worked on comic books together, and what I realized through, and honestly working with Dawn and great editors, kind of makes you realize sometimes you have to back up and state your vision, say what you want, show covers of things you like and things you don't like, and then not micromanage it, because then what you're going to get is my artistry, which I'm a writer, not technically a graphic artist. So you're going to get your best work if you let the artist kind of figure it out. And that's what happened. I let go of the reins of both books, and I think that the covers are amazing. If I do say so myself, I think this cover is so right in here exactly what I want it to be, and I was unable to say it out loud. And that's what a good artist should do.
Mm-hmm.
And the interiors too. I wanted so bad to have a chapter art, and I know that people don't have to let you do stuff like that, but Dream Spinner was so amazing. They're like, yeah, pitch it. What do you have? And so I pitched this idea of Clockwork meets fantasy with the dragon wing and the Clockwork gears together. And I think I pulled up a little picture here of that too. So I'm so excited to show some of that together with the dragon wings with the mixture. Anyway, I'm so excited. I'm geeked about it. I even got a little gears as text breaks in the art in the books. It's really fun.
It's really gorgeous.
But let go and see what happens. That's the idea.
And it worked out really well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, when you were here in episode 42, we were talking about a historical hockey romance called The Long Season.
Yes.
This is a total departure, unless you're going to talk about the fact that you're dealing with historical times.
Yeah.
Had you always seen in your career like switching up the genres so completely?
Yeah. It's a great question. I want to challenge myself to do something completely different every time. And so like being a new writer, writing historical fiction was crazy. That's too much to take on. And I said, well, whatever. It's a labor of love, So then for my second novel, a trilogy themed like science fiction, like, oh my God, you're crazy. That's too much. You're not gonna be able to handle it. And who knows? We'll see. The first one got picked up. Thank you, Dream Spinner. And I'm super excited about it. But I wanted to challenge myself. And I love that genre. So I said, let's do something completely different. People ask me about doing a sequel of The Long Season or doing another hockey book. And I'm really proud of the fact that I wrote a character, Maggie, in The Long Season, who was Brett's best friend. Turned out to be Brett's best friend. Started off with Jean-Paul, which I'm really proud of, that people want a Maggie story, and I think that's amazing. And who knows, that might happen. I might do that. My grandmother certainly when she read it before she passed away, she said, "It can't end here." And
she's right.
Like, we need another story. And I did all that Roaring Twenties research. Who knows? I might go back. But, I want to challenge myself to do something different. And I could write another hockey book because I love it. And I love the whole romance side of it. And who knows,
I was thinking you need to find a way to introduce hockey into the Infernal Instruments universe.
I mean, there might be some sports related in there a little bit, but like medieval hockey, that would be fun.
They've got some magic. They could figure out how to freeze the pond anytime they wanted to, at least in my vision.
I mean, 1880s isn't too far away from Lord Stanley, so they could theoretically run into Lord Stanley somewhere, That could happen. Good idea. I mean, I'm trademarking. It was my idea.
Oh, yeah. You heard it here. It's his idea. Do you foresee more in this universe potentially if the trilogy works out and is successful?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's set up perfectly for a TV show. That's huge, right? But I've even thought about. I have a friend who's a game designer, and I've even thought about, man, that'd be amazing. That whole steampunk idea. It's a huge world, and you'll see in book 2 the world's even bigger than you see in book 1, because it's a world at war. It's a world half conquered by clockwork-powered England and half conquered by magic-powered Ireland. So everywhere you go, France and Germany and Africa and potentially the United States, are they even the United States? It's a huge world. So the stories could go anywhere. Mm-hmm. I think of like Gideon Smith books. Gideon Smith and the Mechanical Girl, I think the first one's called. At some point they end up in a airship going to the United States and the Wild West, and Egypt and all kinds of things. And steampunk it's open.
Cool. Yeah, I hope that it just keeps going and expanding. So what's coming up next directly for you? Are you done with book two, or still writing on the trilogy? And can you look beyond this first trilogy at what's next?
Well, interestingly enough, it goes back to your first question. Is I have, or your last question? I mean, book 2 and 3, the trilogy has a beginning, middle, and end in my head, and it ends. Of course, there could be more after that, much like the long season. But in my mind, I've already started. I'm about halfway through writing a third, completely different genre book, challenging myself with something completely different, which is a contemporary YA book built on my travels to Antarctica. So it's a YA, two young people who meet and fall in love on a cruise to Antarctica, and it's sort of a travel log and what happens and the interesting things and people and penguins that they see. And I won't give away too much, but anyway, that's what I'm in the middle of now.
Oh,
so that's been going on for a while. So I don't know how we find with full-time jobs, how you find time to write. It's certainly hard, but it's a labor of love, I guess.
That's exciting. A little something new there. That's again totally disparate, but you mentioned you wanted to keep mixing it up. So
yeah. And this is right now it's a trading places sort of thing, like What If It's Us? It's a chapter per person, and we'll see how that works out. I'm working with a little gender non-conforming character, which is really new for me. It's taken lots of research, to get intersectionality in the forefront of the book. Not as a ploy, but as a reality of
mm-hmm.
the world that we live in and people that need representation. So I'm really excited about that.
Hurry up and write that, please.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, you'll probably, hopefully, if you're willing, you'll probably see it before anybody else as a proofreader. So
fingers crossed. So what's the best way for folks to keep up with you online, to keep up as Infernal Instruments continues and this new contemporary book starts to take shape?
If they go to my full name, michaelvancegurley.com, maybe the easiest way, you go on there and there'll be clicks from the links to my 2 book sites and to my Instagram. They can go to Captain Rhetoric on Instagram and find me. That's where I write self-involved book reviews, where hopefully people care about what I think about these amazing books that I read, and travel pictures and just little bits like that. Not too much of me, just sort of what I see about the world. So I like to do that on Instagram, and so that's the best way to keep up with me.
Cool. All right. Well, I wish you the best of success with Absolute Heart. It's been great to talk to you a little bit about it. And when that contemporary is done, you'll have to come on back.